Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Hivinger. I'm getting ready to read The Flint Heart, Chapter 2, The Reign of Phut. It so happened that at the entrance to the main rock wall that ran all around Grimm's Pond, 3 children were sitting in the road playing knucklebones. When they saw the great and beloved warrior Phut approaching, they called to him, "Come play knucklebones with us, Mr. Phut." "Get out of my way," shouted Phut, and before the startled children had time to move, he gave a mighty kick and sent them flying in 3 directions. A woman who witnessed this terrible sight went screaming into the village. "The great warrior Phut has gone mad," she cried. "He's killing the children at the gate." The father of the children, who thought, of course, that his children were dead, went rushing out and began cursing Phut with the strongest words in the tribal language, such as Safuda and Beeflink and even Bubblink, none of which, fortunately, we can still pronounce today. When the distraught father had finished sputtering his curses, Phut coolly took out his flint heart axe and whacked the man on the head, killing him on the spot. That wasn't very nice. Consequently, people hesitated to disagree with him. To question his judgment meant a broken jaw or a dig in the stomach. Those unwise enough to openly argue with Phut often found their heads split down the middle before they could take their hats off. Yuck. Mrs. Phut, like a proper wife, sided with her husband, but the 13 little Phuts howled if he looked at them, and ran for protection to the great, lean, wolfish sheepdogs that guarded the flocks by night. But once he had had a word with the sheepdogs, even they turned cowardly, and the moment they heard his voice, they bristled and growled and sculled all the way with their tails between their legs. They were afraid of this man. After about 3 days of this, the tribe waited until they were sure he had gone off bear hunting, and then sent a delegation to Brock to beg that, in the innermost of peace and progress, the head of him be removed from his shoulders as quickly as possible. These people weren't very nice, were they? Naturally, Phum was chosen to speak for the delegation, but he rather garbled the petition, for like everybody else, the mystery man was terrified that Phut would return before any plans could be made. He was stuttering and panting as he described all the kickings and jaw-breakings and stomach diggings, not to mention downright killings that Phut had committed. "Take a deep breath," said the chief. "There is no hurry, my dear Phum. I am disengaged until supper time," which shows what a wise and considerate and reasonable person Brock was for those days. Phum thanked him and continued, "We therefore beg, implore, and beseech, and also pray, that it may please your cheerful and kind-hearted amiability to stand between us and the awful severity of Phut." "He's coming," cried others who had kept their eyes nervously on the gate. "The sooner he comes, the better," said Brock. "We are greatly annoyed, and it is quite wrong and not at all nice. Don't we have plenty of enemies if he wants to go around killing people? I don't approve of this loose way we have fallen into of killing one another without a proper reason. It isn't gentlemanly, and it sets a poor example for the children. What's more, I won't have it. Tell Phut to come here at once." "I regret to say that he won't be ordered," Phum said. "Only yesterday 2 courageous people tactfully hinted to Phut that his conduct threw him open to criticism. He replied by chopping them in 2. "Then it is time for us to act," said Brock. He rose from his granite throne, hitched his white rabbit-tailed trimmed bearskin robe about him, and put on his kingfisher feather crown. Phut must be cautioned, he said sternly, and if it happens again, he shall be punished. The chief called for his chair of state, and 4 of his warriors carried him onto Phut's door, with the entire population of Grimm's Pond trailing behind to see what would happen. They found Phut standing in his doorway eating a piece of cake, while behind him in his rock house was Mrs. Phut, Mrs. Phut skinned the bear that he had brought home on his shoulders. "Good afternoon, Phut," said Brock. "Good afternoon," said Phut, with his mouth full. "You're having your tea, I observe," said the chief politely. "You observe right," said Phut. "Does it occur to you that a great many brave men would also be having their tea at the moment if you had not hurt them?" "Pooh," said Phut. "Don't be sentimental," and he went right on eating his cake. There followed a long, painful silence during which you could have heard anybody wink. Finally, Brock climbed down from his chair and, staring right into Phut's face, said, "Look here, Phut. Am I your chief or am I not?" "You are not," answered Phut. "Then I accuse you of treason," said Brock, who was beginning to lose patience, "and you know what the punishment is for that." "That is neither here nor there," said Phut. "What I say is that I deny you your right as chieftain of this clan and claim it for myself." "Perhaps you will tell me why," said Brock. "Because I'm stronger and bigger and younger and better manager than you," said Phut. "You may be," answered Brock, "though I am not prepared to admit at all that, but as I am chief, and these gentlemen and ladies are perfectly satisfied with that, the way I and my wife manage things, it ill becomes you to talk this nonsense. You are in the minority of 1. "So be it," said Phut. "Then who will join the minority?" No one said a word, and the fearsome Phut spit on his hands and took up his battle axe. "If you won't all join the minority, then you shall all join the minority," he cried, and with this dreadful threat he shouted at the spirit of the thunder to lend him a hand and boldly attacked the entire tribe. His first blow laid Baka Baka Tik dead on his feet, and though the thunder spirit didn't actually kill anybody, it rattled and roared a good bit and made it clear that it was all for a change. So the rest of the warriors surrendered without any further unpleasantness, because their wives begged them to on behalf of their children, and besides, Phut promised them all a present on the occasion of his next birthday. Then Phut put on the bearskin with rabbit tails and the kingfisher crown, and everybody bowed down before him and asked what his first order as chief was going to be. As it turned out, Phut's first order was to build a funeral pyre and burn Brock's body on the top of it. That was to be a splendid funeral, at which Phum was to compose a funeral song long enough to last for 3 days. As was the custom at the time of the sudden death, Brock's ashes were to be carried miles and miles away and buried under a huge pile of rocks. This was so that his ghost would get lost in the middle of the moor and not by any chance find his way back home. Then I shall ascend the granite throne, and we will rejoice for a month and eat and drink day and night until we are nearly burst ourselves. And after that we shall want some hard work and exercise, so I shall lead you against all the enemies." So Phut reigned instead of Brock, and we don't want to go into the terrible things he did because they were too awful to speak of. He won all the battles, and everyone in the tribe did exactly as he told them to, though they hated the ground that he walked on. Poor Mrs. Phut was so unhappy that she died, but Phut didn't care. He married 27 other wives and bullied them all. Among his other deeds was the destruction of all the Bagaboos, except for one that he kept on the chain to frighten the children. He caused the tribe to become the fiercest, most cruel, most powerful tribe in Dartmoor. But despite all the riches and power, their new roads and chimneys, and the fact that Phut invented farming and declared lots of holidays, nobody liked him because he was ruled entirely by fear. And to be always frightened gets on people's nerves after a while. So despite all the triumphs and the splendor, Phut was a cloudy and careworn man. Sometimes he looked back and bit nostalgically on those days when he had a soft heart, but he never really considered going back. And as he grew old, he clung to his terrible flint heart and was sure that no future chief of his tribe would be able to get along without it. So he summoned Fum and made him promise that he would hand the flint heart on to a certain grandson whom Phut had chosen to succeed him. Fum promised to do so, but he didn't keep his promise. When the ashes of Phut were taken far out on the moor for burial, and while everyone was distracted by the lengthy verses that Fum was singing to commemorate the solemn occasion, the mystery man secretly dropped the flint heart in among the chief's ashes, and it was buried along with Phut until under hundreds and hundreds of rocks. For Fum knew the awful harm that it could do and wished it to disappear forever. And here, for 5,000 or so years, we leave the terrible flint heart resting deep in the bosom of the moor.